Travis Lowe.
Stephen Stow.
Welcome back to season 2 of Questioning Faith. It has been, it's been a good minute.
It's been a minute. We've walked through a pandemic.
We've gained some weight.
Yep, some pandemic pounds, added a few new tattoos, added a few more pounds, you know. Life's going great.
You are thriving right now.
I have watched every single show on Netflix. So
Twice.
Things are great. Yeah, life is good.
When you go through the second time, though, you
get the nuance.
It really does. Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
So, ministry-wise, what's going on with you there?
Yeah. So, still kind of doing a lot of the same stuff I've been doing, but we've moved into a kind of a new phase. So, in the last couple months, I've been teaching some classes on theology, and we're kind of moving into a more formal approach to that, relaunching our Foundations program.
Dude, that is so exciting.
Yeah.
So that's going to include seminars a couple times a year.
Seminars.
It's going to include 4 classes this first year.
Yep.
And people can find out about that, baylife.org/foundations, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm super excited about that. Just teaching people at a deeper level what it means to follow Jesus. So,
that is so exciting.
And we're continuing to do that through the blogs and through the podcasts and now through this Foundations program. So a lot of cool stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. So the blogs, some amazing guest writers this year. Just notably Andy Hardy and Rhiannon Ray and
Bobby
Varghese.
Jerry Hicks.
Yeah, so some amazing lineup of authors here in-house. And then also, you've had some exciting people on the Stone Table podcast. Just give me one or two. You had a guy talk about lament a couple months ago.
Right.
That was super exciting. That was so formative for me.
Right. So we had Soong-Chan Rah, who's a professor at North Park Seminary up in Illinois, I think, and he talked about the Book of Lamentations, which is one of my favorite episodes we've ever done, as he kind of applied it to our current culture, as we navigate issues of racial justice and the fallout of a pandemic, and what does it look like to lament and be sad about things that are genuinely sad, but also lament with an eye towards justice and towards what it looks like to embody God's justice. And so,
absolutely.
Great episode, tons of great episodes. We've talked about the 10 Commandments, we've talked about the Lord's Prayer, we have covered all sorts of stuff. So
wow, that is so exciting. So again, real quick, to you straight out there, if you go to baylife.org/resources, you'll be able to pull down not only episodes like this, but also you'll be able to find the Bay Life blog, which our team writes there, and also the Stone Table podcast, which we have disseminated across the world. I mean, it's on
every
Google
place you can find a podcast.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's getting a lot of traffic, a lot of popularity. We've got some great guests coming on, so that's exciting to see.
For sure.
But we are here today for Questioning Faith.
Yeah,
and that
at long last.
Absolutely, at long last. And so if you have questions regarding faith, we would love to hear from you. So if you just go to baylife.org/question or send your email to questions@baylife.org, you will be able to submit a question to us that we will hopefully be able to tackle on this episode or on an episode in the future.
Yeah, hopefully not this one, because I already got ready for these questions. So
absolutely.
If we get a new
Lots
one,
of preparation goes into place in order to answer these. So I'm excited to tackle this first one. Love this first question. It's honesty at its heart. So let me just go ahead and pop right in. Why didn't God have a woman write a book of the Bible?
Yeah. Okay. So
big question there.
Yeah, important question, and a question that I think, especially at Bay Life, and hopefully in other churches, we can feel the force of, because women are so crucial to the ministry that we do here at the church.
Agreed, wholeheartedly.
We've got so many gifted women here in leadership. I think of Darnisha Taylor, our worship pastor. I think of my mom, Betsy Lowe, who's the children's ministry pastor. Carmelita Boyce, who serves in ladies ministry. My wife, who's a worship coordinator.
Absolutely, she's constantly leading in worship in our student ministries, both middle and high school, our college and career ministry, and then Sunday mornings, she's picking up reps there too.
Right.
So it's so exciting to see her lead.
Right.
So
I think
just amazing women of faith.
Absolutely. So I think we can understand, I hope, that we need the voices of women in leadership in the church to adequately express the gospel. But the question comes from the fact that, as far as we know, and there are certainly books in the Bible that are anonymous, and so we don't know who wrote them, but as far as all of the books that have a name attached to them, they are all written by men. I mean, it's Paul, it's Peter, it's James, it's John, it's Jude, and the list can go on and on. And so it can feel like, as important as women are to the ministry of the church, their voices are silent in Scripture. But I actually think that when we dive deeper into Scripture, that's untrue. That the Bible takes great pains to preserve the voice and the perspective of women. And so let's see if we can, in 5 minutes or less, kind of do like a tour through Old and New Testament and how the voice of women are preserved. Yeah,
let's dig in.
Yeah,
I'm so excited. You know, the first thing that came to mind was the interview with Soong-Chan Rah.
Yeah,
because for me, Lamentations was this powerful book, and then his perspective was that the writer of Lamentations stepped aside so that the woman's voice, or so that the lamenter's voice could come through so strongly. He was just documenting at that point.
Right.
And that was really, really exciting to hear. So, I mean, I'd like to hear your perspective on that.
So to kind of unpack that, and I think Soong-Chan is absolutely right in this. The traditional view is that Lamentations was written by Jeremiah, who would have been literate, who would have been privileged, a part of the upper class, but it's written after the fall of Jerusalem, and it chronicles the trauma of the people who witnessed the destruction of Jerusalem and who were left behind after the pillaging of the city. And as you read Lamentations, you realize that the perspective of Lamentations is not the perspective of a wealthy man. It's the perspective of women in poverty who've lost their children, who've become widows, who've seen their husbands die, who have just suffered incredible trauma. And so Soong-Chan points out that what appears to have happened with Lamentations is that rather than Jeremiah writing from a privileged perspective, what Jeremiah does is he steps aside and he documents the voices of the women and the marginalized who've seen the city fall. Okay. And so the book of not Jeremiah, but the book of Lamentations is actually Jeremiah preserving the voice of the women who witnessed these atrocities.
Who actually went through this season, this horrific season,
right,
in Old Testament history.
Right. Yeah. So even in that book, you see somebody in a position of privilege stepping aside and elevating the voices of women. Another example I think of, if we go further back in the Old Testament, is in the book of Exodus. You know, we just taught through Exodus as a church.
Love it.
Took a long time.
Good. Yeah, absolutely. But I don't even think we're done yet. So we just got the beginning. We're just just barely climbing Mount Sinai at this point. So,
but I think of early on in Exodus, you know, the Pharaoh grows concerned about the growing population of Jewish people in Egypt, and so he issues this command to have all of the Jewish boys put to death.
Right, right.
And there are two midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, who resist the Pharaoh's order. They refuse to put the Jewish newborn boys to death because the scriptures tell us that they feared the Lord. So what's interesting in Exodus is Pharaoh is one of the most powerful men in all of the ancient world at the time in which this is taking place. And Moses never records the Pharaoh's name. You never get the name of the Pharaoh, but you do get the name of these women.
Of Shiphrah and Puah.
Right, exactly.
Which is incredible.
Right.
I mean, so the fact that he's basically documenting these women of honor, he's saying, hey, this is legitimate in our desire to tell this story.
Right, and I love that he doesn't name Pharaoh, because it's almost as if Moses says, these women's story is more important than the most powerful man in the ancient world. And he says, it's as if he says when he composes Exodus, I can't tell the story of the people of God without telling these women's story, without lifting up their voice and their perspective.
Incredible, yeah.
So, I mean, you can even jump ahead into the New Testament. Luke, I think, has the longest description of Jesus' childhood.
I love that you bring up Luke, because you know it's my favorite book.
Yeah,
so,
and I mean, with good reason, right?
Absolutely.
Like, it feels bad to play favorites in books of the Bible.
It really does,
right?
but Luke is my favorite.
Right. So, I mean, I don't have a Luke tattoo. I've got a John tattoo. So I guess John's my favorite. But here's what I love about Luke is that it has this lengthy description of Jesus' childhood. And most people acknowledge that Luke is kind of the historian of the New Testament. Yeah. You know, well-educated doctor, and that Luke spent time before he composed his gospel going to the eyewitnesses and chronicling their stories about the upbringing of Jesus. It's why it's so detailed.
That's why I love it, because I believe that Luke is it's the scripture for the guy who asked the questions.
Right.
It's the scripture for the skeptic.
Yeah.
You know, and so I love that because he took such painstaking effort to document fully, you know, is it over here? No, it was that one over there. Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Just double checking.
Well, I think that shows in the narrative of Jesus' upbringing, because at the end of that whole section, Luke says that Mary stored up all these things and treasured them in her heart and pondered them as she thinks about the miraculous conception of Jesus all the way through to his adult life. And many commentators have said the reason that Luke mentions that is probably because the whole opening 2 to 3 chapters of Luke are the result of Luke sitting down with Mary and saying, tell me your experiences with Jesus. And Luke is just writing them down. So again,
he's just reflecting. He's stepping aside and he is reflecting that which, in that day and age, many women they were not allowed education.
Right.
And so he is documenting for them, like
he's stepping aside. He's using his privilege and his position to elevate the voice of Mary, the mother of Jesus. Again, as
which is
if
so
to
important
say,
because Jesus elevated the voice of women as well.
Right, without a doubt. I mean, women are the first eyewitnesses to the resurrection. You know, you see that there. And then I think as we go on in the New Testament, one of my favorite examples comes from the book of Romans, right? At the end of Romans, I think it's chapter 16, Paul is listing all of these people and these different partners with him in ministry. And Romans is like the book of Christian theology, right? It's like the book that nobody wants to touch because there's so much intricacy to it. And then he says, in the beginning of chapter 16, he says, I commend to you Phoebe, a deaconess in the church. And here's what N.T. Wright points out. He's a New Testament scholar. Normally, letters in the ancient world had a particular person who was designated to carry the letter.
Right.
And because Paul places Phoebe in a place of prominence, he says there's a really good chance that Phoebe was the one who was given the letter of Romans and said, take this to the church in Rome. Paul hands it to Phoebe and says, take it to Rome. But here's the interesting thing. In the ancient world, the letter carrier was responsible for explaining the letter to the recipients. So here's what we have going on in Romans, the most complicated, in-depth theological book in the Bible. Paul hands it to this woman, Phoebe, and says, you need to go explain to these people what this letter means. So the first interpreter of the book of Romans is Phoebe.
Right. And Paul trusted her with that to say, hey, let's make this happen.
Yeah, so I think consistently what we see in Scripture is that the story of God cannot be told without the voices of both men and women. And this goes back to Genesis 1, that in his image he made them, male and female. John Paul II, the former pope, 2 or 3 popes ago, has this collection of essays called The Theology of the Body, and he's reflecting on this idea of being made in the image of God. And he says the image of God is not something that any one gender can fully express. We need each other for it. That we together bear the fullness of the image of God. And I think you see that in Scripture, that the mission of God, the story of God, it goes forward both in the voices of men and women, and you see those voices intermingled and bearing witness together in the Scriptures.
That is awesome. Well, Travis, thank you so much for helping us with this question, and we'll see you next time.